G'day, I'm Appy Dave, and today we're looking at Devin from Cognition. This is the world's first autonomous AI programmer. That's how they tout it. And what I want to do today is talk through 6 different use cases. So we're going to be looking at image manipulation, generation. We've got training AI models using AI. We're going to add a feature to an open source project. We're going to look at a side hustle, how you could earn $25 an hour on Upwork. We're going to look at bug fixing and unit testing. And we're also going to look at the game of life. So we will also get into how to get access to it, and I'll also give you a tip to make it a bit easier. And we'll also look at the elephant in the room, the risks and the fears associated with this product. Now, to get started, secret messages in images. So one of the developers at Cognition, her name is Sarah, has written a prompt within the environment saying, I saw this blog post about putting text onto images. Is it possible to generate these images and the hidden text? Can you write a script by looking at the blog post? And what Devin has done is said, yes, absolutely, I can do this. Do you want me to generate the images? What sort of text do you want me to put on it? And she's putting, could you put in the word Sarah? Can you put in Devin? And can you also do Cognition? And what it has done is gone off to this URL that she provided called Hidden in Plain Text and read this particular tutorial. It's read the tutorial and started to implement it, and it's run into a few problems as it went along. So what Devin does is it links out to other URLs and tests to figure out what to do next, and it's ended up writing some code. So from here we can see that it's generated Sarah, and it's gone on to do the other two that she asked for, Devin and Cognition. Now let's look at the next use case. So this is where AI is training an AI. And what we have here is this repo called Clora. So efficient fine-tuning of quantized LLMs, a little bit of a mouthful. But what has happened is gone into Devin's workspace and said, can you fine-tune a 7B llama model using this URL, which is the URL to the repo. There should be instructions in the README file. So what Devin does is it clones the repo down to the local computer, sets up the environment, in this case using pip, and then starts following the instructions. Now, one of the things that happens during its processing, reinstalled bits and bytes for CUDA compatibility. So basically it ran into an issue with CUDA in the NVIDIA environment. But after that, it gets going, it starts training, and it just runs for about an hour. It starts off with successfully initiates and monitors the training, and then later on shows the progress with decreasing loss. Now, the next use case to look at is adding a feature to an open source repo. So here we've got this screenshot from a particular repo with these 4 errors being shown. Now the product is mprox, and it runs things locally in the terminal, and someone had an issue where they didn't like the way this was being displayed. It wasn't really going down fine grain into what the error was. So what they did was they went over to an issue register within the repo, found a particular issue in this case, and gave it to Devin. So Devin says, write a fix for this issue. Do not commit the push or your changes. So what it does is it starts reading the documentation from the repo, and it's followed the README file to get things working locally. Then it starts installing the dependencies locally, and then finally moves on to the issue that's trying to be resolved. So this issue gets resolved with a little bit of code. So it's written the code within Rust. And one of the things that happened during the reading of the code or the writing of the code was that it had an error. So it was able to branch out automatically to the Rust documentation to figure out what was going on. After that, it finishes the product. This was the before of the actual application running, and the after has a little bit more detail, plus shows where issues aren't there in dark brown in this case. One of the other things that it went off and did was created a pull request. So the pull request is ready and you can upload it to GitHub. So from there, we'll move on to the next example. So this is that side hustle I was talking about. Basically, here we've got this little job that's been advertised and says, I'm looking to make inferences with the models in this repository. And basically, it's a road damage vision system. And one of the things that's interesting about this is the particular employer is paying around 23, 24 US dollars an hour for this sort of work. And what they've been able to do is go and find the repo. We've got it here, Road and Damage Detection 2020. And from there, you can look in the README document. So we've got READMEs around how this is all meant to work. We've also got example images, and the example images are really showing where there's cracks in the pavement. It's trying to detect it, I guess, for maintenance. And so what they did was just give that URL with a simple prompt. Please figure it out. So nothing complex going on here. And what it does is it creates a plan of action by reading the documentation, of course, and we've got cloning the repository, read documentation, install dependencies, run the models, review the output. So one of the things that happens is, if needed, it'll go and do some debugging. So one of the issues here was there was a dependency problem, so it's automatically upgraded one of the dependencies here. It's then started downloading a bunch of images to test with. So as it goes through, if it has debugging problems, it can debug the way a regular programmer does. So in this case, it's just printing out some text to the console, and notice that to the right, it's moved it away at the end. So when it's finished, it gets rid of the debugging console output, which is wonderful. It was then able to go and make an improvement to the code and run the image models again. So we've got a bunch of images that it's running detection on. And at the end, we've got a bunch of examples here. And we can see in this area, it's highlighted the section that has some cracks in the pavement. So for the next example, we'll look at fixing a bug and writing unit tests as well. So coming back to this is by one of the developers at Cognition, and he basically has a competitive programming repo, and it's got a whole lot of tests and stuff that people can work to. And someone's reported an error to him and said, look, it doesn't work in this particular edge case. Now, he went and manually made a change to the code. So we've got the old code on the left, we've got the new code on the right. And then he said, I need a test. So he asks it to write a test. He gives it a little bit of information about what it should be looking for, that it should be reading the repo itself and looking for this particular test structure to create. And what it does is it starts writing the test. So we've got some code here, and we've got a test case, and from there it starts running it. Now, it ran into a compilation issue. So the compilation issue then gets dealt with by itself. It looks up what to do, implements the fix, as you can see here, reruns the tests, and hopefully everything's successful. Now, they were successful, but the developer gave it extra information and said, I really want you to run a brute test. I want you to run it across a whole lot of different edge cases, because the first test did work. So let's see what happens under a brute test scenario. And we get an error. And the good thing about what Devin has been able to do with this error is it's been able to write some console logging to the screen for each of the iterations of the tests. And we can see them all here, and one in particular failed. This -9 was where the issue was. So what it was able to do was add a little bit of extra code into the system, rerun the tests, and everything passed successfully. So the next use case we're looking at, or the last one, is the game of life. And the game of life was, we've got this idea of create an application using React. We've said set up a front-end environment using React and Chakra UI, and add the P5 library from a CDN. And so we see the code being generated. You notice there's things like shell, browser, planner, and editor going on here. And from that, it says the personal website Game of Life has been successfully deployed. So it even deployed it to a Netlify server. So here we got the game working, and I was a little confused when I watched this demo. I said, okay, that's great, but why did it work? We only saw code for the HTML, not for the JavaScript. So one of the things that I did was just check how could it have worked. There was an example of the Game of Life on P5. I assume it found that example, but a bit further on, he shows a little bit of the code going on. So there's some code going on here, and there were a couple of bugs, there were a couple of improvements that needed to be made to the Game of Life. So one of them was that this 180 over here on the left, or 3 seconds, was causing a bit of a stoppage. So it's made a few modifications to the code. He's also said, can you add a feature? I'd like to be able to click somewhere and start new iterations of the Game of Life. And this is what happened. Starting off with Devin written on the screen, the next iteration was that it starts expanding out. This is how the Game of Life works. We go a bit further, and then the developer decided, I'd like to make it interactive. We saw that prompt there earlier, and so now it's made it interactive. He uses his cursor, he draws on the screen, and it starts from there. Here's another example starting right here. So the last couple of areas to look at is, how do we get it? Like, how do you get Devin? So the best way to start is to go over to their website. It's cognitionlabs.com, and there'll be this section called Join the Waitlist. Now, once you get there, here's some things to think about. Fill it in properly, because I'll give first preference to people that fill this information in. But there's a hint that you need to think about, and that's writing a prompt for a program you want to create. So I'm just showing you one here. It was the one I did from my own application for this product, but I'll show you how I created this so that if you want to write it yourself, you don't have to go through and write such a detailed requirement. So what I did was I went over to ChatGPT-4 and I said, can you write a prompt for an AI programming bot? So you've got to make it realize it's not for ChatGPT, it's for a different system. And then you just give it a simple goal. I gave it a simple goal and a simple set of information going on about it. In my case, I turn a lot of the videos I do into articles and YouTube descriptions, and that's the program I want to create here. So I've given it some examples of what it can do, but then these areas down the bottom are also important. So I said, note, you don't need to write prompts for GPTs. There is a very constrained bit of code I want it to write. I've also said it's command line, and I've also said that it's working hand in hand with a human programmer. So whatever it does need to have a feedback mechanism. So this was the prompt I typed into ChatGPT. It then wrote a much more detailed specification, which I was just able to copy and paste directly into the application form. So the last area is risk and fears, and I think this is where a lot of people are a little bit concerned about these AI developers, and I'm just going to talk through a few of them. The one I really noticed in this is the cybersecurity risk. Now, there'll be plenty of cybersecurity risks going on, but the one that made a lot of sense to me was that it's downloading repos and it's running them locally. And one of the issues in the media at the moment is all the repos that are being cloned, they're using AI to fake them up and then put injection attacks into them. So this is something that is a real risk with using any AI automation programmer at the moment. I'm assuming that GitHub and the likes are going to start having badges of authenticity for good repos. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but this is something you need to think about from a risk point of view. The next thing is creative limits. So the good thing about the AI programmer is that it can be really quick, but it will go down paths that may not be optimal. And this is where us as developers can bring our own creativity in it. And that leads into the next area, which is the complexity of the software development lifecycle. Now, I'm a software architect within an enterprise, and I realize that when you write software, you should be following best practices. You should be following the patterns of the rest of the enterprise and stuff like that. So you have issues such as Do we use RESTful APIs? Do we use gRPC? Do we use Rust? Do we use Python? We've got all these sorts of issues. Now, if you're not thinking through these issues and you're not instructing your bots, this will just create a bit of a mess for the business that you're trying to create software for. And that then leads to this area of job displacement. Now, when ChatGPT, the current, came out, I started using it straight away. I'd been using the OpenAI APIs before then, and I pretty much use it for all my coding and everything I do. And that's one of the things that I think you need to think about with this job displacement issue, is that we still need human programmers. We can think things through where the AI programmer, it'll be a long time before it ever can. And that leads to the other thing, is that if you're using it, you now have scalability. One of the challenges I have with all the software that I use is that there's software that I have to use, I must use it as part of my day-to-day productivity, but sometimes it sucks. I don't like what it does. And one of the things I've been able to do is write all sorts of software very quickly because of the scalability of using AI programmers or just coding directly in ChatGPT. So I think there's a lot of work in the foreseeable future for software developers. We just need to start thinking differently. So for me, the solution has been, since November 2022, GPT. I use it everywhere. And what I'm doing at the moment is putting together a GPT Academy, and that's basically where I get small groups of people. They come along once a week and we can sit and talk about the sorts of problems that they're trying to solve. It's often about prompt engineering, sometimes about coding with GPT, sometimes it's about the different applications like the one we're talking about here. I'm Happy Dave. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.